Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also congratulate the previous Speaker, the Honourable Member for Chesterfield, for, as always, a thoughtful and sometimes political, but nevertheless thoughtful contribution. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, this debate has focused on a number of things this afternoon, particularly issues about accountability and cuts. And today I want to talk about my own the situation in my own constituency, what has gone wrong, the cost of crime, and some of the solutions. Now, there have been, I accept, great strides made in fighting antisocial behaviour in some cases. And in my constituency of Harlow, there have been some major reforms and successes. Recent police operations have had success in targeting the few prolific offenders that cause the majority of the problems. Nevertheless, the town still suffers from the highest violent crime rate in Essex, a high rate of burglaries and car theft, and, in terms of crime and disorder, some estates suffer from the worst 10% of deprivation in the British Isles. We also have serious problems in Pacific areas, such as the town centre. Now, although crime in these areas is not always reported to the police, as with every member, local residents often contact me and mention it to me frequently in surgeries. That is why this debate this afternoon is so important. Now, we do have some very effective local police officers in Harlow and some good leadership in Essex. However, I believe that across the wider UK, sometimes there has been a breakage of trust between the police and the public. The umbilical cord that existed has been cut. Raymond Chandler, the American novelist, said, "Crime isn't a disease, it's a symptom." And we've said already this afternoon that Tony Blair promised to be tough on the causes of crime. But the last government approached prevention in quite a chaotic way. For example, they sadly rewarded family breakdown by penalising couples in the welfare system. They also failed to ban the sale of alcohol below cost price. Now, we see this elsewhere too. We talked a lot in this debate about CCTV. Now, of course, I'm in favour of CCTV when it cuts crime. But the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, the front bench Home Office Minister for Bexley and Sidcup, a few years ago came with me to visit a company in Harlow called Rotor Testing, which trains people on CCTV. And they have shown through Home Office studies that around 80 to 90% of CCTV is not in this country, is not fit for purpose. Why is it not fit for purpose? Either it doesn't comply to the Data Protection Act, or it's not operated properly, or the machinery is not working properly. And in 2006 alone, we spent around £250 million on CCTV that wasn't working in the way that it should. Only a couple of years ago, Deputy Chief Inspector of the Met, Mick Neville, said that CCTV was an utter fiasco, with only 3% of London street robberies being solved using security cameras. Now, although we now have more cameras than any other European country, he said that no thought had gone into how to use them. Now, of course, we have to have CCTV, but I would like the situation that we prevent crime, so we need less CCTV cameras. It's not that we don't want CCTV cameras, we want to prevent crime so they're not needed in the first place. Another problem was the micromanaged target culture, some of the things which have been said again in this debate by the last government, and the bureaucracy, in part driven by the Honourable Member for South Shields, when he was head of Tony Blair's policy unit. So the opposition talk about cuts, and yet their government established a National Crime Reduction Board 3 years ago and then gave it no budget. They talk about cuts, but for all their spending, they left England and Wales with twice the crime rate of the European average. Now, the Home Secretary said earlier that there were around 900,000 violent offences in 2009. What the House of Commons Library have shown, that actually this rose from 618,417 offences in 1998. So there has been a huge rise in violent crime. Now, the government's reforms are urgent for my constituency of Harlow, because there is not just the social cost of families blighted by crime, there is also the huge cash cost that is hurting the recovery. Now, the honourable members talking about cuts and expenditure, but what they have to also accept is that their policies led to the cost of crime now costing more than £3,000 for every family in the UK each year. Given that there are roughly 40,000 households in my constituency, that cost to Harlow could be in the order of 120 million a year. During the election, the honourable member for Arundel and South Downs visited a newsagent in Nazing Village with me, which had been robbed 3 times in 3 weeks. The shop was just one of many whose profits were suffering because of crime. Because when you legally oblige a police constable to spend so much of their time on paperwork, you deny people the power to shape local policing, and that is the sad result. So what are the answers? Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Chief Superintendent Mr Simon Williams and Chief Constable Mr Jim Barker McArdle of Essex, that despite the challenging economy, they have no plans to cut frontline police officers in Harlow and intend to keep the police station in Harlow open for 24 hours a day. They are demonstrating, I believe, that a smarter public sector can deliver more for less, even when it spends 80% of its budget on people. In fact, the Essex police had to cut, before we were even on the scene, £2.5 million from their budget earlier this year, without any effect on frontline services. Now, we must also restore the trust between the wider police and restore what I call the umbilical cord between them. And that is why I am a passionate advocate of the government's policies to reconnect police with the communities they serve. The direct election of a police commissioner, and I really can't understand the opposition that the honourable members opposite have to making communities and police more accountable to the communities that they serve. By reducing police paperwork and bureaucracy so constables can spend more time on the street, by introducing regular beat meetings so that residents can hold local police to account, and by publishing more detailed local crime statistics, and by having more specials. And it's tragic that the number of specials declined by 6,000 since 1997, and I completely disagree with the honourable member for Doncaster when she said in her remarks about specials. Don Valley, I beg your pardon. There is also scope for greater community involvement in policing. For example, we have in Essex one of the largest forces of specials in England. In an early day motion 520, I welcomed a statement by the Right Honourable Member for Arundel and South Downs that there is huge untapped potential for recruiting more specials, and I suggested transforming them into a territorial army-type force. This would enable specials to cover more policing duties and would offer excellent value for money. Specials are also a genuinely local force and a valuable source of community intelligence. Now, I'm not asking for extra money, but rather for the government to refocus its resources to incentivise special constables so that they can work more hours and develop professionally. Following many tragic fatalities on the railways near Harlow, I've also called for a similar volunteer force of special rail guards to be established. I did an early day motion 598 on this to improve safety on train platforms. In a time of scarce resources, special constables, I believe, offer the big society answer to the crime problems we face, not just in Harlow but across the country. Fully trained constables with real powers, who give a few hours a week to their local neighbourhood. We already have 600 in Essex. Let us hope we have more soon.
On that issue of special constables, would you agree that there is scope to take the pre-existing special constables that we have and widen the training that they have and widen the opportunities so that they can do alternative tasks on a more big society basis?
Yes, exactly. And my own view is that I would like community support officers to have the chance of becoming specials. Now, in summary, our crime policy must move away from that of the government, which was about bureaucracy and the big state. And we must come back to one of being... Sorry, of course.
I don't know whether you're suggesting, I don't know if I'm right in what I've heard, but I think you're suggesting that police officers go from paid to unpaid. Is that the suggestion you're making?
Completely the opposite. What I'm saying is that the special constable we should create a similar model like the territorial army, and you would have a special constable force, and that they would be paid for the hours that they did, just like in the same way that you pay territorial army people. So in summary, we want to move away from the big state and bureaucratic policies to crime, and have one of accountability and community. And that is why I oppose the opposition's motion today.
Steve McCabe.